The top 10 facts about Jeffrey Dahmer. Welcome back, my fellow true crime enthusiasts. In today's video, we're going to dive into the world of one of the most infamous serial killers in history, Jeffrey Dahmer. But before we dive in, I want to give a little heads up that some of the facts we'll be sharing may be disturbing to some audiences, so viewer discretion is advised. Alright, let's get into it. 1. Who was Jeffrey Dahmer? Before we get into the gory details of Dahmer's crimes, let's take a moment to learn a bit about his background. Jeffrey Dahmer was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1960. As a child, he was described as a typical boy, but he did show signs of trouble as he got older. He struggled with alcohol abuse, and his parents' divorce had a significant impact on him. As Dahmer got older, his behavior became increasingly alarming. He began collecting dead animals and even impaled a dog's head on a stake in the woods near his house. 2. Dahmer's modus operandi. Dahmer's crimes were particularly horrifying because of the way he operated. He would lure young men to his apartment with the promise of alcohol or money, and once there, he would drug them and strangle them to death. But Dahmer didn't stop there. He would often take pictures of their bodies, dismember them, and keep body parts in his apartment. Some of his victims' remains were found in his refrigerator and freezer. 3. The trial of Jeffrey Dahmer. After Dahmer's arrest, he was brought to trial in 1992. Throughout the trial, he showed no remorse for his actions and initially pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. However, he was found to be sane and ultimately pleaded guilty to 15 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 15 life terms in prison, but sadly, Dahmer was beaten to death in prison in 1994 while serving his sentence. 4. Dahmer's childhood. Many people have attempted to understand why Dahmer became a serial killer. Some believe it was due to his troubled childhood. Dahmer was often left alone as a child and had to fend for himself. He also became fascinated with death at a young age, and his parents' divorce only added to his feelings of isolation and abandonment. 5. Jeffrey Dahmer's victims. Dahmer's victims were mostly young men, many of whom were struggling with drug addiction or homelessness. He would hang out at bars and other places where these men were known to congregate and lure them back to his apartment. It's believed that he killed his first victim in 1978 when he was just 18 years old. His last victim was killed in 1991, just a year before his arrest. 6. Dahmer's apartment. Dahmer committed many of his crimes in his apartment, which he referred to as his playland. He would often take pictures of his victims in various states of undress and posed them in strange positions after death. His apartment also contained a number of disturbing items, including skulls, bones, and a vat of acid that he used to dissolve his victims' bodies. 7. Dahmer's confession. After his arrest, Dahmer did confess to his crimes, but the details he provided were often sparse. It wasn't until later that he began opening up more about what he had done. In his confession, he described feeling a sense of power and control over his victims and said that he had always been fascinated with death. 8. Dahmer's legacy. Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes continue to captivate audiences around the world, and even 30 years after his arrest, there are still many unanswered questions about his motivations and actions. His case has inspired books, documentaries, and even movies, but perhaps most importantly, it has shed light on the importance of mental health and the need to pay attention to warning signs in those around us. 9. Dahmer's victims' families. As with any tragedy, the impact of Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes extended far beyond the victims themselves. Their families were forced to grapple with overwhelming grief and shock at the loss of their loved ones. Some even went on to create organizations aimed at preventing future crimes like Dahmer's. 10. Dahmer's death. Jeffrey Dahmer's death in prison in 1994 was not an end to the story of his crimes. Instead, it opened up a whole new line of discussion about justice and punishment in our society. Some felt that his death was deserved, while others saw it as a tragic end to a tragic life. And there you have it, 10 facts about Jeffrey Dahmer. We hope that this video has given you a better understanding of what happened and why it happened.